Hello and a very good morning to all News9 viewers. I'm Neha Bhan. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of this hour. We begin with what's been happening at the Israel-Hamas war front. Let's get you the latest from there.
The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
The war between Israel and Hamas has now entered its 67th day. Let's get you the latest update from the war front right on your screen. Now, Israel has said it is ready to fight for months to defeat Hamas. The IDF is operating according to international law. That is what the Ministry of Defence has said. Now, troops encircling last Hamas strongholds in the north. That is what Israel has claimed. Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza remains under siege. This is what reports are stating. Now, Biden under scrutiny after bypassing Congress to supply weapons to Israel. United States President Biden is under scrutiny after bypassing Congress to supply weapons to Israel. Now, US has again reminded Israel to avoid civilian harm. White House is concerned by reports of Israeli military using white phosphorus. Talking about the death toll, more than 18,000 Palestinians have been killed in the war. Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant said that Israel does not intend to stay permanently in the Gaza Strip and that it was open to discussing alternatives about who would control the territory as long as it was not a group hostile to Israel. Gallant said, and I quote, Israel will take any measures in order to destroy Hamas, but we have no intention to stay permanently in the Gaza Strip. We only take care of our security and the security of our citizens alongside the border with Gaza. He also said that Israel was open to possibly reaching an agreement with Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah in Lebanon, given any agreement included a safe zone along the border and proper guarantees. Listen in.
Israel will take any measures in order to destroy Hamas, but we have no intention to stay permanently in Gaza Strip. We only take care of our security and the security of our citizens alongside the borders with Gaza and elsewhere. אנחנו נמצאים לקראת נקודת שבירה בצפון רצועת עזה, בעיר עזה, ואנחנו נמשיך את הפעולה הזאת גם במקומות אחרים. ואני קורא מכאן לכל אותם גדודים, לטרוריסטים, למפקדים שלהם, למפקדי הגדודים, תיכנו. אם תיכנו, תוכלו להציל את חייכם. אם לא, דינכם נגזר. לטרוריסט שנמצא בפתח המנהרה, אין אלטרנטיבה. הוא יכול לבחור באחד משניים, להיכנע ללא תנאי או למות. ובאשר למי יממן מה, כאשר יקום כוח אזרחי חדש, שינסה לדאוג לרווחת התושבים, אמרתי, אנחנו נהיה פתוחים לדון בכל החלופות. התנאי הבסיסי יהיה שהגוף הזה לא יפעל באופן עוין נגד מדינת ישראל. כל היתר, לדעתי אפשר לדבר עליו, זה בוודאי לא יהיה חמאס, וזה גם לא יהיה מדינת ישראל. אנחנו נשמור לעצמנו את חופש הפעולה, לפעול באופן צבאי כנגד כל איום. יש לנו יכולת לענות כנגד כל איום, באופן דומה או מעבר לו, ואנחנו עושים את זה כל יום, בגלל זה יש להם הרבה מאוד הרוגים והרבה יותר פצועים. אם חיזבאללה יאפשר תהליך הסכמי, ואני לא נכנס עכשיו לפרטים שלו, אבל ברור לגמרי שהוא לא יכול שלא לכלול את המצב שיש מרחק בטוח מהגדר שלנו, בהקשר לכוחות שיכולים לירות אל שטח בישראל, או בהקשר לכוחות שיכולים לעשות פעולות בתוך ישראל, אם הדבר הזה יתאפשר עם הערבות המתאימה, יהיה על מה לדבר.
A video released by the Israeli army on Monday reportedly showed weapons inside a mosque in Jabalia, northern Gaza. The video was presented by an unidentified member of the IDF. Now, in the footage, the IDF soldier describes the scenes inside the mosque where the army claims to have found weapons and a Hamas training area. Take a look.
היום תקפנו פה מסגד, ואני אראה לכם מה מצאנו בפנים. פה בקומת קרקע, מסגד רגיל, לא מצאנו יותר מדי, אבל אם עולים למעלה, אנחנו מגיעים פה לקומה השלישית, איפה שנכנסנו פה לחדרים, מצאנו ממש כאן מרחב אימונים של הארגון, נשקים, מחשב עם תוכנית אימונים ומקרן, כדי לעשות כל מיני סיטואציות ולהתאמן. הרבה מאוד אמצעים אלקטרונים שפה החמאס מתאמן ומכין את המחבלים. בצד השני, בחדר השני, מעבדת אמל"ח. מצאנו מעבדת מטענים, ממש מאלף ועד תו, סוללות, הכל. זה מה שיש בתוך המסגדים פה, זה מה שיש בכל מסגד ומסגד שאנחנו נכנסים אליו.
Now, United States State Department Secretary said that the U.S. is concerned about reports that Israel used U.S.-supplied white phosphorus munitions. A Washington Post report on Monday claimed that Israel used the munitions in an October attack in southern Lebanon that injured at least 9.
I will say that our expectation of every country to whom we provide military assistance, weapons and other assistance, is that they use that assistance in full compliance with international humanitarian law and the laws of war, and Israel is no exception. First, which is that we are concerned by the reports of the use of white phosphorus. Obviously, there is a legitimate military use for white phosphorus, but that does not include using them on civilians. It means that if you use them, you have to do everything you can to minimize civilian harm. Anytime that we provide items like white phosphorus or really anything to another military, we do it with the expectation that it will be used for legitimate purposes and in full keeping with international humanitarian law and the law of armed conflict. So we're looking into this and looking for additional information. And then with respect to your first question, you heard the Secretary speak to this yesterday. If any of you were up early on a Sunday or early-ish, you would have heard him speak to this and make clear that, look, Israel is engaged in a very difficult military campaign against a terrorist organization that says it wants to repeat the attacks of October 7th. He decided that with respect to this sale, this was a munition that they needed on an urgent basis, and so it necessitated an emergency authorization to provide those munitions. But that does not in any way lessen their obligation to act in full compliance with international humanitarian law. Those images we found those images deeply disturbing, and we are seeking more information both about the nature of the images and, of course, why they're public in the first place.
Israeli Army spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari on Monday said that Israel's army was operating legally and according to international law. His statement comes after concerns by the United States about reports Israel used US-supplied white phosphorus munitions in an October attack in southern Lebanon. Listen in.
סיפור של הזרחן שהופעל בלבנון. אנחנו פועלים בצורה אחת ברורה, באופן חוקי ועל פי הדין הבינלאומי. כך אנחנו פועלים, כך אנחנו מפעילים את הכוח גם בצפון וגם בדרום, וכך נמשיך לפעול. מאז חידוש הלחימה, צה"ל ושירות ביטחון כללי עצרו כ-140 מחבלי חמאס וארגון אג"פ. זאת בכל רחבי הרצועה. סך הכל נעצרו רק בחודש האחרון יותר מ-500 מחבלים. יותר ממחציתם נלקחו להמשך חקירה בשטח ישראל. אנחנו חוקרים את המחבלים בשטח, והם מספרים לנו על מקומות מסתור של מחבלים נוספים, ומספקים מודיעין משמעותי לייצור מטרות חדשות להמשך הלחימה. החקירה הזאת היא קורית בשטח בזמן אמת, כאשר מחבלים נכנעים. אנחנו עוצרים את מי שצריך לעצור אותו, ומשחררים את מי שאינו מחבל, ומורידים אותו מהנקז דרומה לאזורים שבהם אזרחים יכולים לשהות.
Hagari also said that over 500 terrorists from Hamas and smaller group Islamic Jihad had been arrested so far in Gaza and taken to Israel for questioning. US President Joe Biden's administration has faced criticism after revealing it bypassed Congress to supply tank shells to Israel. The administration reportedly failed to conduct ongoing assessments of whether Israel might be involved in possible war crimes. On Saturday, the US Defence Security Cooperation Agency published a declaration stating that Secretary of State Antony Blinken had invoked emergency powers to supply nearly 14,000 tank rounds to Israel, bypassing the requirement to consult Congress under the Arms Export Control Act. According to a Washington Post report citing unnamed officials, the US did not adhere to guidelines established by Biden earlier this year in February, which required all arms transfers to foreign governments to undergo continuous scrutiny of the recipient's record of the Geneva Conventions and other global norms for conducting warfare. Flares and explosions lit up the Gaza sky on Monday as Israeli forces continued their bombardment of the enclave. Israel began a ground offensive in southern Gaza last week after the collapse of a week-long truce on December 1st. The IDF has since pushed from the east into the heart of the city of Khan Yunis, with warplanes attacking an area to the west. The United Nations General Assembly is preparing to vote on Tuesday for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in the two-month-old war between Israel and Hamas. The humanitarian crisis has deepened in Gaza and hunger is worsening among Palestinians in the besieged Gaza Strip. Reports suggest that hundreds more civilians have lost their lives in Israel's assault on Gaza since US vetoed a Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire on Friday. Most of Gaza's 2.3 million people have been driven out of their homes. The 193-member General Assembly is expected to pass a draft resolution today that echoes the language of the resolution blocked by the United States in the 15-member Security Council last week. Israeli Sharon Aluni, 52 years old, survived as a hostage in Gaza with her two little girls before she was released in an Israel-Hamas swap deal. But she now fears for the life of her husband, who's still captive in the bombarded Palestinian enclave. Take a look.
Sharon Aloni Cuneo, along with her two young twins, spent a harrowing 52 days as a Hamas hostage in the Gaza Strip. And in the first interview since her release, she told Reuters her thoughts were now with her husband, David, who is still held captive.
3 days before we were released, they separated David from us. They took him into a different hiding place. And since then, I don't know what is happening to him. The girls are torn. I'm torn. He's been my partner for 10 years. He's my other half and the love of my life. He's the father of my girls who are asking every day, "Where's Daddy? Where's Daddy?" I need to explain to them that he is still there.
Aloni Cuneo was one of 240 people taken hostage on October 7th by Hamas gunmen, who burst through the border with Israel and killed 1,200 people. The militants who attacked her kibbutz set fire to her house and took her away at gunpoint after she climbed out the window. She was taken across the border with her husband David and one of their twins. Their second daughter was held separately in Gaza for 10 days before they were reunited in captivity.
Every minute we're waiting is like a Russian roulette. Will they live through the day or not? And the conditions are difficult. Conditions that no one needs to live in, especially not children or adults without medicine. We saw that many have already lost their lives in captivity, so each moment is critical. And we need to do everything to put the aim of releasing all hostages prior to anything else.
Aloni Cuneo said her group of hostages were held above ground and moved a few times. But with memories still raw and with her husband still inside, she declined to go into details. A 7-day truce saw more than 100 hostages released. The rest are still being held as Israel bombards Gaza, vowing to take out Hamas. According to local health authorities, more than 18,000 people have been killed in Gaza since the start of fighting. Now back at home with her twin 3-year-olds, Julie and Emma, Aloni Cuneo pleads for the remaining 137 hostages to be freed.
There's a lot of families without a father, without a daughter, without a brother, without a grandfather, grandmother, mother. It's like 138 families there that needs to come back now. You have to do everything you can to bring them back now.
Now, Bengaluru, where chaos and innovation collide in a daily battle for mobility. Traffic is the biggest black dot in this progressive city. Our documentary delves deep into the heart of Bengaluru's notorious traffic problem. Take a look.
Bangalore traffic is an example of something that has gone wrong with our system.
We have more than 50 flyovers in Bangalore city. If flyover is a solution to traffic problem, Bangalore should not have traffic problem.
According to TomTom Traffic Index 2022, Bangalore is ranked as the second worst city in the world when it comes to traffic.
The speed limit at the ORR is 80 kilometers per hour, but our vehicle has only moved 10 kilometers per hour.
What Bangalore needs is a surgery, but what we have been offered repeatedly are band-aids.
Only on the world's first news OTT. News 9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
Welcome back. Now, Donald Trump maintains a strong position in the 2024 Republican presidential nominating contest with 61% support among self-identified Republicans, according to a recent Reuters Ipsos poll. In comparison, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley trailed with 11% each. Entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy had 5% and former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie garnered 2%, while 8% were undecided. The poll, conducted online between the 5th of December and the 11th of December, surveyed 1,689 self-identified Republicans with a credibility interval of plus or minus 3 percentage points. The first ballots of the 2024 U.S. elections will be cast in Iowa's Republican, on the 15th of January. The poll found little evidence that Republican voters are swayed by the battery of federal and state criminal charges that Trump faces. As EU leaders grapple with the challenge of renewing financial support for Kyiv and extending an invitation for membership talks, Ukraine issued a warning on Monday. The nation's European ambitions are at risk, primarily due to Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban threatening to block support for Ukraine nearly 2 years after the Russian invasion. The EU faces the delicate task of avoiding internal division while addressing key issues that require unanimity. Simultaneously, the United States' backing for Ukraine is also under scrutiny from Republicans in Congress. As discussions unfold in Brussels at the EU Foreign Affairs Council, the fate of Ukraine and potential internal divisions within the 27-member state takes center stage in a pivotal week for the future of the Union. It is important to note that President Volodymyr Zelensky has long stressed how vital it is that European capitals decide this year to start formal EU membership negotiations with the country. The European Union's 27 leaders could decide at a summit this week whether to launch formal membership talks with Ukraine, a step that would provide a much-needed boost for Kyiv amid uncertainty over the future of vital wartime foreign assistance. But what does Ukraine need to do to keep its bid for membership alive? Take a look to know more.
European Union leaders could decide at a summit this week whether to launch formal membership talks with Ukraine. The step would offer a much-needed boost for the war-torn country and provide some security over future foreign assistance for its defence against Russia. But what hoops must Ukraine jump through to keep its EU dream alive? Brussels offered Kyiv candidate status 4 months after Moscow's February 2022 invasion, prompting an immediate rush by Ukrainian authorities to reform priority areas identified by the European Commission.
I want to tell you how impressed we are by the reforms you've made in the midst of a war.
The Commission reported last month that Ukraine had fulfilled 4 of its 7 recommendations. Most requests were aimed at shoring up the rule of law and include hiring anti-corruption officials, preparing the judiciary for a major overhaul, and aligning media legislation with EU standards. The Commission, which suggested the remaining 3 conditions be met before talks were formally launched, said it would assess Ukraine's progress again next March. By last Friday, lawmakers had passed legislation to meet virtually everyone. But accomplishing short-term requirements is just one part of the bid. The Commission has made sweeping policy change suggestions across multiple sectors by the end of 2024. Covering areas from public administration to food safety. Ukraine is expected to prove its fight against graft, intensify its crackdown on large-scale illegal smuggling, reform law enforcement, and find ways to reintegrate displaced Ukrainians into the labour market to bolster the economy. There are a number of more granular measures too, like improving the country's state statistics collection and getting its intellectual property rights rules in line with those of the EU. Political challenges lie ahead too. Despite the Commission's support, any decision requires the unanimous backing of EU leaders, and not everyone is keen on Ukraine joining. Hungary has emerged as the bloc's top critic of Kyiv's membership bid. European officials say another summit might be needed early next year if leader Viktor Orban continues to resist talks and additional financial support for Ukraine. Some also say that Kyiv's window to push ahead with more reforms may be narrow. An expert from the New Europe Centre think tank in Kyiv says the Western Balkans' protracted membership process shows accession is not always merit-based and equally dependent on intra-bloc politics. And one European diplomat in Kyiv, who spoke on condition of anonymity, said it will be crucial for Ukraine to demonstrate steady progress to avoid flagging enthusiasm within the EU. Essentially, the stars need to align on multiple fronts for Ukraine to get a true chance at being the bloc's 28th member.
President Vladimir Putin announced his intention to run for the upcoming March election during discussions with Russian soldiers who served in Ukraine last Friday. Putin addressed the actions of the Russian army in Ukraine and highlighted the progress of the country's military industry, emphasizing the need for a strong foundational ideology, industry and finances for a sustainable future. Listen in.
The army performs in Ukraine more and more competently. It's obvious. Military industry is gaining traction. We've started producing several times more. I know that we still don't have enough of everything, but they are running out. When you don't have foundation of your own, no ideology, no industry, no money, they have nothing of their own. Then there is no future, but we do have one.
President Vladimir Putin participated in a televised flag-raising event for 2 nuclear submarines, highlighting Russia's strategic push to bolster its naval capabilities. The ceremony held on Monday showcased the submarines, underscoring their imminent deployment in the Pacific. Putin emphasized their role within Russia's ongoing rollout of distinct submarine series during his visit to the Savemarsh shipbuilding yard.
Soon submarines with missile weapons, Emperor Alexander III and Krasnoyarsk start duty on the Pacific Ocean Fleet, protecting the far eastern borders of our motherland. Works are on, raising the Russian naval power, and it will undoubtedly continue.
A manhunt is underway in the Swiss alpine town of Seine following a shooting that resulted in the death of 2 individuals and the injury of a third. The incident involved a 36-year-old shooter firing multiple rounds across 2 areas in the town. While initial investigations suggest a connection between the assailant and the victims, authorities are yet to determine the motive behind the attack. Police have cordoned off the area and established checkpoints, cautioning the public against approaching or confronting the potentially dangerous individual. Russian opposition politician Navalny has been removed from the penal colony where he had been imprisoned since the middle of last year, and his current whereabouts remain unknown.
Russian opposition politician Alexei Navalny has been removed from the penal colony where he had been imprisoned since last year, his allies said on Monday. They say his current whereabouts are unknown. They refuse to say where he was transferred, Navalny's spokesperson posted on social media after speaking with staff at the IK6 facility east of Moscow. Aides have been preparing for his expected transfer to a, quote, special regime colony, the harshest grade in Russia's prison system, after he was sentenced in August to an additional 19 years in prison on top of the more than a decade he was already serving. There was no immediate comment from the Kremlin. His disappearance comes at the start of the campaign period for a presidential election in which Vladimir Putin confirmed he would run for another 6-year term. With the Kremlin in full control of state media and able to decide who can and cannot run, the Navalny camp says this is not a real election. Hours after the election announcement last Thursday, the opposition camp posted photos on social media of giant blue billboards it had placed in major cities. Under an innocent-looking greeting of Russia Happy New Year were QR codes leading to Navalny's Not Putin website. But the impact was brief as authorities took down the billboards and blocked access to the site. Russian authorities view Navalny and his supporters as extremists, with links to Western intelligence agencies intent on trying to destabilize Russia. Navalny is by far the best-known figure in Russia's opposition. For years, he has branded Putin and the ruling elite as a gang of crooks and thieves, lampooning them in slick videos watched millions of times on YouTube.
We now slip into a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with much more on the other side.
He thought he could outlast us. And 1 year later, the evidence is right here in this room.
Who will blink first? So far from preventing the expansion of NATO, Russian actions have actually resulted in the expansion of NATO.
It's a mess for Russia and it's a mess for the Western world, for NATO and the United States.
Putin is a dictator, and if he loses, that means the end of his regime, and probably of him personally. So he has to keep going.
Year 2, no end in sight. Streaming now.
The scale of the attack was something that we were surprised at. David Hadley was a double agent. The Americans did not want him to be fully exposed, so all that he probably shared with the Americans was not shared with us in terms of intelligence. If we had that, I'm sure that we would have been able to deal with the situation far better.
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9+. Download now. ChatGPT. It can generate codes and human-like responses through text, write stories, and do a lot more.
I work in a newsroom with anchors, researchers and scriptwriters, graphic artists, producers, video editors, camera crew. But does a newsroom really need them today?
All of us have to think about unique and distinctive value addition that cannot be automated or repeated or replaced by a machine.
ChatGPT may kill many companies.
A human has to be in the loop with an ability to control this.
Dark Side of the Boom. Streaming now.
Today, she is the only smiling leader in Rajasthan. All eyes will be on her moves if the BJP returns to power.
Vasundhara Raje Scindia defied all the odds to become the first woman chief minister of Rajasthan.
She has the uncanny ability of striking rapport with all sections. That's why she is very popular in her constituency, not only in her constituency but in entire Rajasthan.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, Newsline Plus. Download now.
Welcome back. In a dire warning, a new report suggests that the climate crisis may lead to an alarming surge of up to 10,000 additional deaths annually in the UK by the 2050s, primarily due to extreme heat and the spread of tropical diseases. Published by the UK Health Security Agency, the report outlines a worst-case scenario where average temperatures could soar by 4.3 degrees Celsius, resulting in a 12-fold increase in heat-related deaths by 2070, with a notable rise predicted in the 2030s. Health effects of climate change, the HECC report by UKHSA reveals the potential transmission of diseases like dengue, fever and Zika virus carried by insects. The Asian tiger mosquito, known for transmitting such diseases, may establish itself across England, Wales, Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, posing a serious threat by the 2040s and 2050s. However, the UKHSA emphasizes that these projections hinge on a worst-case scenario with room for mitigation. Behavioral changes and strategic measures such as national heat and cold alert systems, improved housing with energy-efficient features and enhanced flood defenses could elevate the health impacts of climate change. The report urges decisive actions to counter the impending damage, emphasizing the adoption of solar energy, energy-efficient lighting and passive or low-carbon heating and cooling systems. In 2022, a record-breaking 4,500 people in England succumbed to high temperatures, underscoring the urgency of addressing climate-related health risks. Furthermore, the report highlights a disproportionate impact on vulnerable and disadvantaged communities, signaling the potential widening of health inequalities as the worst health effects of climate change unfold. Now, do stay tuned for updates as authorities address this critical issue. The draft language of a potential climate deal at the United Nations COP28 summit in Dubai suggests a range of options to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But amidst the phase-out of fossil fuels, many delegations are demanding, including the US and European Union.
The draft language of a United Nations deal on climate change, unfolding at a summit in Dubai, does not include language to phase out the use of fossil fuels. Language that is being demanded by over 100 countries, including some top oil and gas producers such as the United States, as well as the European Union's delegation. The summit, known as COP28, has been running for 2 weeks, and the impasse has set up a difficult final round of negotiations Sources familiar with the talks have told Reuters that the UAE, which is hosting the event, has come under pressure from Saudi Arabia, the de facto leader of OPEC, to drop any mention of ditching fossil fuels. It's left some delegates distraught. This was Canada's Climate Minister Stephen Guilbeault.
I understand, we're the fourth largest oil and gas producer. We get it. It's complicated. It's unnerving. It creates uncertainty in parts of our country. But it's not a reason not to do it and not to tackle this problem. And even if we bury our heads in the sand, it's still going to happen.
Some young activists used hot air to push the conference to act. These balloons spell the word Yalla outside the venue, meaning let's go in Arabic. A Saudi government spokesperson did not respond to a request for comment. Although the language doesn't include ending fossil fuels as is, it does include other options, such as reducing the use of fossil fuels to achieve carbon neutrality around the year 2050, and ramping up technologies that capture carbon emissions to keep it out of the atmosphere. Representatives from some Pacific Island countries, which are already suffering from rising sea levels, such as Samoa and the Marshall Islands, said the weaker language, if it's adopted, is a death warrant.
The much-awaited snow-graced Beijing this week painting the city in a serene white blanket. However, the winter wonderland came with its challenges. Multiple regions in northern China experienced heavy snowfall disrupting normal life. Schools had to close their doors and transportation faced hurdles due to the thick layer of snow. In Beijing, security guards and workers in residential compounds were spotted tirelessly shoveling snow to keep pathways clear. Parked vehicles bore witness to the overnight transformation adorned with a thick layer of fresh snow. However, residents expressed delight at the snow. Now, in Zhengzhou, the capital of Henan province, the city's weather bureau issued a blizzard red warning in the early hours on Monday. The warning projected temperatures to dip to minus 1.1 degrees Celsius. Fortunately, the alert was lifted later in the morning. Myanmar's Rohingya face a wave of hostility and rejection in Indonesia, where regional communities say they are fed up of a spike in the number of boats carrying the persecuted ethnic minority to their shores. More than 1,500 Rohingya Muslims have landed in Indonesia since November, data from the United Nations Refugee Agency shows, including at least 300 arriving last weekend. Arrivals tend to spike between November and April, where the seas are calmer, with Rohingya taking boats to neighboring Thailand and Muslim-majority Indonesia and Malaysia.
Rohingya refugees are facing a wave of hostility and rejection in Indonesia, like this protest on the island of Sabang in Aceh province. People in Aceh were for years sympathetic to the persecuted minority from Myanmar, who turned up on dilapidated boats. But there's been a spike in arrivals and a backlash. Protesters last week tore down tents and threatened to push boats back into the sea, according to images shown on local television. Babar Baluch, an Asia spokesperson for the UN Refugee Agency, said UNHCR was alarmed by the reports. Local resident Ella Septia accuses the Rohingya of causing trouble. Aceh has many poor people, she says. Why should we take care of thousands of Rohingya? For years, Rohingya have left Buddhist-majority Myanmar, where they are generally seen as interlopers, denied citizenship and subjected to abuse. Mohammed Hassim arrived in mid-November after 14 days at sea. He says he fled dangerous conditions in Bangladesh's Cox's Bazar refugee camp, only to meet hostility in Aceh. We were intimidated, he says, and had to come here. So we have to put up with whatever the Indonesian administration and the public do to us. Our future is in their hands. Hazara Hatun also left Bangladesh.
I'm afraid that we'll be forced to leave Aceh. I left all my family there, and I don't know where else to go.
More than 1,200 Rohingya have landed in Indonesia since November, UNHCR data shows. At least 300 more arrived last weekend, some of whom local media said were moved to the office of the provincial governor, after the community in Aceh's Besar district rejected them. A spokesperson for the Aceh government did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Indonesian President Joko Widodo said his country would take firm action against human traffickers, whom he blamed for the surge in arrivals. He promised to work with international organisations to offer temporary shelter.
Tourism has plummeted in the Israeli-occupied West Bank's Bethlehem this Christmas season, leaving businesses struggling to keep their doors open as the Israel-Hamas war enters a third month. Before the outbreak of the war in early October, the hotel was overbooked with tourists and pilgrims visiting Bethlehem for Christmas. Take a look. Nestle, the maker of Quality Street, and Mondelez, the owner of Cadbury, are experiencing increased confectionery sales in the UK during the holiday season. This surge is attributed to budget-conscious shoppers opting for more affordable gifts. Globally, consumers seem inclined towards economical presents this year due to the impact of a high cost of living.
Shoppers around the world look to be buying cheaper gifts this holiday season. Hit by a high cost of living, many are now cash-strapped, and figures from the UK suggest the taste for lower-cost presents is proving a boon to chocolatiers. Quality Street maker Nestle and Cadbury owner Mondelez have both seen higher sales in Britain. Business executives say many consumers have ignored toys and gadgets in favour of chocolate, which are still relatively inexpensive despite price rises this year. Nestle said boxed chocolates have seen a year-on-year rise of 8.7% in value sales over August to November. The company said shoppers typically spend under £10 or $13 on such items. Tins of Nestle's Quality Street traded around $6.30, while Mondelez's Cadbury Selection boxes cost less than $2. Both are proving popular. In contrast, one leading data firm says the average selling price of a toy in Europe is about $16.30. A number of toy makers told Reuters earlier this month that demand was lower this year. The UK supermarkets have also helped out chocolate companies. Sainsbury's and Tesco have offered discounts on big brands to customers with loyalty cards. One leading survey said 9 out of 10 British Gen Z shoppers will trade down to cheaper products this holiday season, while 83% of millennial shoppers will do the same. Overall, almost 3/4 of respondents said they would buy cheaper gifts.
The pink-themed movie sensation Barbie is leading the nominations for the Golden Globe Awards with 9 nods, surpassing the historical drama Oppenheimer, which received 8 nominations. The films, known for their summer box office clash dubbed Barbenheimer, will compete in different categories at the upcoming Globes ceremony in January. Notably, this year's Globe winners will be selected by a new organization following the dissolution of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association in June due to ethical concerns and a lack of diversity. Now, both of these movies, the pink-themed movie sensation Barbie as well as historical drama Oppenheimer, are now competing for Golden Globes. Barbie is leading the nominations for the Golden Globe Awards with 9 nods. It has way surpassed Oppenheimer, which received 8 nominations in total. We now leave you with a documentary. Now, Pakistan, in fact, is training women to act as intelligence operatives and trap influential Indians. They seek confidential information in lieu of sexual favors. Experts warn defense personnel and scientists not to seek love in the virtual realm. Take a look at the snippet.
I recently received a friend request from Mahira Sharma. Now, we seem to have a lot of friends in common on social media.